I have to tell you, Our Lady certainly went before us today, because yesterday as I was preparing for this, I kept saying, oh, Our Lady, I know I can't call in an apparition, but wouldn't it be nice if you were there, people could see you? And then I came and saw the statue here. I love her. She has such a lovely sense of humor. Well, ladies, every one of you who are here today, because I've done this many times, you may think you came on your own free will, but rather you know it or not, you came by divine invitation. We have the privilege, and it is a privilege, of being able to call ourselves Catholics. I don't think that we really realize that sometimes when we walk out in the world, how blessed we are. And I'd like to tell you the story of how I came to this place of truly, truly praising and thanking God for my Catholic faith, because it didn't begin that way. Now, growing up Catholic, I remember many of the homilies, the priests would talk about how our earthly father was like our heavenly father, how he had no limits. But yet when he said that, instead of invoking a sense of peace and calm, it filled me with terror. Because then, if my earthly father was an image of my heavenly father, it meant that he had favorites, and I wasn't one of them. And it meant that he had times when he wished he had never chosen me as a child of God. And so, by the time I was 16, I could not take living in my father's house anymore. The abuse had gotten so completely out of hand that I ran away and never returned again. And at that moment, not only did I leave my earthly father, but I left my heavenly father too. It wasn't until 1980 when I went to the hospital thinking I was having a heart attack, and they found a thyroid tumor and later diagnosed it as cancer, that I revisited how I felt about God. At this point, I didn't have any real faith that God existed, or that if he did, he wanted anything to do with me. But I had a hope he did, because over the next year, I became more and more ill. Attached to the thyroid are two little glands called parathyroid glands. Never heard of them, never thought much about them, but let me tell you, they're very important. They control your body chemistry, and specifically your circulatory system. Well, they removed the tumor, and they tried to transplant these glands in my shoulder blades, and they would not take. And for the next year, the ambulance coming to our house became a common occurrence, until finally I realized that I wasn't going to make it. At this point, my circulatory system was so bad, doctors could not fix the chemistry flux, that my hands were often purple or black, and I feared at one point I'd probably have to have them amputated because there was no blood circulating in my limbs. And then in this night in 1981, I developed a viral lung infection. And I don't know if any of you have ever had that, but it's like an elephant sitting on your chest, and you're fighting for every breath. But I would not let the hospital admit me, because I knew that I did not want to be put in a respirator. In your heart, when you're this ill, you know that you are dying. And so I asked my husband to take me home to die. And that night, we sat and we talked about, I had 3 children. I was raising a sister. What I would like to have them, the different things that we would like to do as far as raising our kids. And I had already made out a living will. And then I closed my eyes. I really believed I would never open them again. But the strangest thing happened, and I can only coach this in the form of a dream. Suddenly, I was on the top of a very high mountain, and I was looking down at the most beautiful valley I have ever seen. The colors were so pure that it's like this side, this dimension we live in here is the reverse side of a tapestry. And And at that moment, I felt somebody walk and stand on my left. And I knew that that someone was God. I also knew at that moment everything, I had a flash vision of everything I had ever done that was wrong, but not in the sense that I would think of wrong. This wasn't about stealing something from a store or cheating on your income tax. This was about, I could have been kind to someone and elected not to. I could have said a kind word. I could have gone out of my way to help someone in need, and I was just too busy. Now, the Kate Valentine that stood there stands here, so I went to explain why I did this. I have a real good reason. And God said to me, you don't have to explain, because here everything is already forgiven. And at that moment, there was a tsunami of peace. And I can't possibly find the words to explain what I encountered. But just imagine a place where there are no worries, no fears. You don't worry about the future. You're not guilty about the past. You're simply resting in God's arms. And suddenly I had a knowledge that if I could reach that valley floor, I would never have to leave His presence again. So I raced down that mountain like a maniac. And I got halfway down. And I heard God's voice calling me back. And He said, Kate, it's not your time. I want you to go back and I want you to tell the world, a Connecticut housewife, right? Two things. One, that no matter how difficult the trial or the tragedy, they are never alone. I am right with them. And at that moment, I understood the significance of the valley and how beautiful it was when I was standing with God, because it showed me how beautiful those times are, those times that we try so hard to get away from. That is the time when God's presence is the closest. And the second, He said, the highest form of praise you can give me is to love others in my name. And then I awoke, and I was completely healed. Now, I can't explain to you the mind split that happens at this point, because the rational mind says this can't happen. You couldn't have stood with God. It was just a dream. I went to the doctors. My husband, St. Paul here. We went to the doctors. I didn't tell him what I had experienced. I would not tell him for 5 more years, because I didn't want to lose my validity by saying, hey, hon, guess what? I stood with God, and He healed me, and He gave me a mission. It was so cute that when I finally did tell him, I hadn't realized the transformation that this journey was taking on me. And he said to me, oh, thank God that's all it is. You're so changed. Wait a minute, it gets better. So changed. You are so changed. I thought you were having an affair all these years. So I went to the doctor. And I said to him, explain this. They did the test. There was no more cancer. There was no trace of a viral lung infection. All systems were go. Transplants were working. And I said, explain this to me. I wanted so much to have a rational explanation for this. It was so much easier to deal with than what I had encountered and thought I had encountered. And I'll never forget his words. He looked at me and he said, can't. Sometimes these things just happen. Why would God call a Connecticut housewife to do anything? How would I do it? And I had been away from the church since I was 16 years old. I was in my 30s now. I had never experienced a Mass in English. And at the same time, my very best friend, Judy Nolette, she and I got diagnosis of cancer 2 weeks apart. And she was a lovely Catholic woman. Oh, Lord, forgive me. I'm going to have to probably spend time in purgatory for this one. But I used to taunt her. Oh, if God is real, why did He do this to us? And she'd say, well, what makes you think this is of God? And I thought of her and I thought, God, why didn't you choose to heal her? I mean, I have a learning curve like that. She would have been a much better candidate.